All right, good evening.
No.
Hopefully everybody's having a good week. And hopefully everybody had a good day. Had a pretty good day. I have been really nervous leading into this. Don't really know why. Just, uneasy feelings. But I do want to start because I know Casey asked me this week to speak on Samson, which is basically chapter 13 through 16 in Judges. And it leads basically through how Samson was born, and then also basically how he lived his life. And Samson, through his life, and we're going to dive into it, but through his life, Samson was blessed by God and basically anointed by God and born basically like an unnatural birth. And yet, Samson basically did everything in his power to live his life for himself. And he almost never gave God any credit. But the beauty of Samson's story is how it ends, when he repents. And, Samson's story is a really good story for us to read. Yes, it sounds great because everybody has this image of Samson, right? He's basically like a Fabio type character, right? He's got beautiful long hair. Everybody, images of him are like these super muscular, handsome men. But the story is really good for us to understand because it's the story of a man who, again, he has a gift from God, which we all have a gift from God. We've all been given a blessing from God. Yet, we all waste it. I think the reason I'm getting emotional is because I realize until recently how much I wasted. God's calling, God's gift. And now that I'm using it, I look out amongst people and I think to myself all the time, why would you waste it? And then you read a story like this man, where it's like, God didn't give me a calling where he literally said, hey, you will literally defeat the Philistines. You are going to be a man of immense strength. People will bow to you and you're going to rule Israel because I'm giving this to you to do this. I didn't have a calling like that. Yet, you read a story like that and it's like, this man chose to say, how can I abuse this power God gave me? And reading through it, basically that emotion is that idea of we all do that in some way, right? We take something good that God gives us and we try to find out, how can we use it for us first before turning to God for guidance, right? And usually we don't turn to God for guidance until, just like Samson, as soon as it starts getting bad, we say, okay, God, I need help now. And so, with that all being said, this is still a great story. It's sad, but it has a beautiful ending. And it's got a beautiful beginning. Because, again, the story starts like all the other ones in Judges, where the people of Israel were doing evil in God's eyes once again. So God gave them over to the Philistines. They go through suffering, and then God, he decides to pick a family. And the family he picks, it's a beautiful, I get why he picked them. Because again, the people of Israel were basically doing evil in God's eyes at this point. Basically, they were doing everything not godly. They were avoiding being how God called them to be. But this family was a family where the wife was childless, and she was unable to give birth to a child. But an angel of the Lord came to her and said, you are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. And then he tells her, and this goes into the Nazirite vow, which is, do not drink wine or any other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines. Now, if you don't know, the vow, then Nazirite vow, it's from Numbers, and in Numbers it says the same exact thing, but it also talks about, and this is very pertinent to the end of Samson's life, where it says his hair, for example, is one of his staple features. Well, the hair, the reason it's not to be cut is because that is a symbol that he is with God. So everybody will know just based on his hair, hey, he is with God. That's how people will know. So if he loses his hair, in essence, he loses God, right? So the woman goes to her husband and says, a man of God came to me and said that we're going to have a child. Now, this is where I said that this family, he definitely picked this family for a reason. Because the husband, he doesn't say no. He says, okay, and goes and prays. He prays to God, that's faith. He's showing faith in this moment when basically all of Israel is not, but he's showing faith, and he prays to God and says, hey, send your angel of the Lord back and guide us on how to raise our son. And what does God do? He does what Jesus tells us he does. He does exactly what Jesus does, which is, he says, okay, I will come and help you because you faithfully asked me. So then the angel of the Lord comes back and tells them the same thing, that they're not to, again, eat anything unclean. They're not to drink any wine. And also with the wine, it's not just don't drink wine. It's you don't drink wine, you don't eat grapes, you don't eat raisins, you don't even go near a vine that could produce anything like that, anything fermented. You don't go near it. And it's pretty neat because towards the end of this section, right before he's born, the father asked the angel of the Lord, he asked him, because he's like, hey, thanks for this guidance. He appreciates the guidance, but then he asked him, hey, what is your name? And I really like this part because we don't really know who the angel of the Lord is, like a specific person. But because of the way the context clues, you can associate the angel of the Lord, especially in this context, with somebody pretty specific. So the angel of the Lord, whenever he's asked, what is your name? The answer back is, why do you need to know my name? Now, depending on what version of the Bible you have, if you have the New King James Version and the King James Version, those two I have, and then if you have NIV, it's a little different, but in the New King James and the King James Version, he says, my name is Wonderful. Now, I read that, and right away I was like, Jesus was with them right there. He's the angel of the Lord in this moment. And the reason I say that is because Jesus, in Isaiah, it says the son who is to be given is wonderful. He's a counselor. And so when you think about that, it's these people were meeting with Jesus, basically pre-incarnate Jesus, right? And we know this really based on how, you can kind of infer it based on how the angel of the Lord was treating them. He didn't come to them, again, Israel's under oppression. And this angel of the Lord didn't show up and say, hey, you're going to get this kid, and you don't get to know why, you don't get to, no, he explains it to them. He gives them guidance, and then as soon as they ask for more guidance, he graciously gives it to them, which again, that falls right in line with what James talks about. And James mentions that, hey, if you need guidance and you need wisdom, what do? You ask liberally, and then God will provide the answer and the guidance that you're looking for.
That's good.
And from this, the angel of the Lord says, hey, provide me an offering. And this is basically the way the angel of the Lord is going to show them who they are. Because again, he didn't say the name of who he is. And when they provide the offering and they light it up, the angel of the Lord goes up, and then his parents, Samson's parents, do another thing that shows faith. And they show that they love the Lord. As soon as they see the angel of the Lord go up with the flames, they drop to their knees, basically in worship, and they say, that's God. They realize that's God. And as soon as they realize it's God, though, they do what everybody does in the Old Testament. They say, well, the Father says, we're going to die. And this is a good dynamic, too, and this is what people need to understand, too, because even this part, the husband gets worried right away and says, we're going to die because we just saw the face of God, which, again, some more context. If you see the face of God, you will surely die. However, there is the way to see the face of God, and this is, again, kind of another context clue of this is potentially Jesus meeting with these people, because many people went with Jesus. Jesus was the Son of God. Jesus is God, because he is I am, right? Yeah. And so it's a beautiful thing. And then the wife, she gives that discernment. She is the helper to the husband, and she does exactly that for him in that moment. She says, no. She's like, hey, why would you say we're going to die? If we were going to die, he wouldn't have shown up to us. He wouldn't have given us guidance. He wouldn't have said you're going to have a son. He wouldn't have said our son's going to save us from the Philistines. And then he also wouldn't have said, hey, do an offering here so I can basically show you who I am. Yeah. And then they are blessed with what God said he was going to bless them with. They have Samson, and then Samson grows up, and the Lord blesses him. So basically, it's saying here that as Samson grows up, he's being blessed by God. And that is a great beginning to the story. So we know this is beautiful because, again, the story starts out with a very faithful family receiving a blessing from the Lord, taking that blessing, raising the kid up with God the entire way. It's a beautiful story. And then Samson, he finds his own way at this point. So basically chapters 14 and 15 is like the core part of Samson's life. And the core part of Samson's life is him doing great feats and doing great things. And he does defeat Philistines, but he does it in a very me type of way. There's not a lot of, hey, I'm glad God's with me doing this. I'm glad God's walking with me. But it does show this. God gave a blessing to Samson. Samson didn't recognize the blessing. And he also did not really walk his life through it as we go through this. He doesn't walk his life showing that, hey, God is this. Now, he's got the long hair, so then people can kind of identify him as, hey, well, he's with God. He's under the vow. But what it shows is God, no matter what, if he has a purpose for your life, that purpose will be done. It does not matter what you think or how you think it gets done. The purpose will happen. If God wants it to be done, it will be done. And that's exactly what he does with Samson here. So, starting chapter 14, right away, Samson he doesn't break the vow in this moment, but he does go against God's will, you could say. And the reason I say that is right at the start of 14, Samson goes into Timnah, and when he goes there, he sees a Philistine woman. And right away, Samson says, hey, Dad, go get that woman for me. Because if you want to get a woman, and during this time, you had to have your father basically bless it, and then you could marry a woman. The father says, why would you want this woman? There's so many other people. We got all these Israelite women. Why would you take a Philistine woman? And Samson says, get her for me. She's the right one for me. And it's funny that he says that, because if you go back and you read Deuteronomy in chapter 7, Moses states that if the Lord gives a group of people to you, basically to conquer them, right? You shall conquer them and utterly destroy them, nor shall you marry them. Yet Samson, again, he's a little bit of I do what I want type of guy, because again, he knows he has power. He knows he has a little something that everybody else doesn't have, but he abuses it. So again, he's going against God's will in this moment. And he says, nope, I want the woman. So his father agrees, even though he doesn't want to, and says, okay, we'll go get the woman. And right here is where Samson does, this is the first part where we start seeing Samson right away goes against the vow that God said that your son Samson is going to follow his entire life. So again, this vow says he can't go near a vine, he can't go near wine, he can't drink wine, he can't eat grapes, he can't eat raisins, right? Well, for them to get to this woman that he wants, it says that him and his father and mother walk past the vineyard. Well, right there he's breaking the vow. So again, he doesn't care what God said he's supposed to do. He's still doing what he wants for himself. Again, he's kind of being a little bit of a hothead of, I can do whatever I want. And that, God's there. And I think that's a really good reflection of our life, right? Because again, a really good example is, for the longest time, especially in our life, I'll use me as an example, just to not call anybody out, but I know in my life for a long time, again, we're called to steward our money correctly. But yet, for a long time, you know how you're supposed to steward money. You should save money. You should give to those who need it. You should give to places that benefit you. You should give to places that could benefit others. You should give to churches. Because churches, what do? They help people. You should not waste money. You probably shouldn't rack up a ton of debt. You shouldn't probably just get what you want all the time and say, I'll worry about the rest later. And then, whenever you rack up a bunch of debt, you shouldn't then say, well, hopefully the Lord blesses me with a lot of money. And hopefully I'm going to go play the lottery. And God, I'm going to pray to you and say, hey, I need some money now. We shouldn't do that, right? But that is what we do. We kind of squander the guidance and the goodness that he shows us and tells us what to do, because we still think no matter what, because this is basically what Jesus was telling us the entire time as he was walking, right? It's, you're gonna sin, you're gonna do wrong. I mean, even his own disciples, when Jesus said, hey, you are going to reject me, because he knew that, hey, you are human, you're fallible. I'm here to die for you because I know you're gonna sin against me. I just know you're going to, and it's okay because I still love you. And yet, even them, when he said that, they said, well, we would never do that. Again, they're saying that to God himself. They're saying, we wouldn't do that to you. I think he knew better. And really, if they probably could look back on it, they'd say, yeah, he did know better. And so they go down, they walk past a vineyard. But this is where, again, even though Samson's not following God, he does, though, get strength from the Lord. And this is where God kind of, I think in these portions of the story, there's like 3 times basically before the time of Samson's death where the Lord shows up and says, hey, I'm still with you. And ironically, there's basically 3 times where Samson just violates the vow that God gave him. And so Samson violates the vow by walking past a vineyard. But then as they walk past the vineyard, a lion springs out, and Samson grabs a lion, and it says that he tears the lion apart as though it were so he rips the lion apart as though it was I forget what it says.
Goat.
A goat, yes. Now, I read that part, and it says it rips it apart as though it were a goat. Now, I don't know how easy it is to rip apart a goat. I don't even know why they use that as a reference point, because I'm assuming Samson was the only one who could also rip apart a goat. But it says when he ripped apart the goat, or ripped apart the lion, like a goat, the Lord came over him powerfully to give him the strength to do that. Now, think about that. God came over him powerfully to basically show him, like, hey, I'm with you, and you have the strength because of me, right after he violates the vow to God. And that, again, shows us how great God is. That no matter what, he is still there. God doesn't leave us. We're the ones who basically try to separate from him. But you know that he's always there, willing to help you. And you just have to be, for us especially, we have to be very aware that, hey, he's there. Don't think, no, I've been too bad, I can't call on God. So Samson rips apart this lion. Now he doesn't tell his parents, which, again, this whole section is kind of odd because he rips apart the lion. One, where did his parents go? And then he just catches up with them again, and it says he doesn't tell his parents that he just ripped apart a lion. That's also odd because, again, he ripped apart a lion. I guess he's not dirty, he's not bloody. The parents aren't confused of where he was for a little bit. And then it skips back ahead where Samson now, later on, now he's going, basically he went with his family to get his wife. And then as Samson's then going back, he passes the lion's carcass. And this is the second point where Samson, again, he goes against the vow again of God. Because he walks past the lion carcass, and when he looks at it, there's bees and honey inside it. And part of the vow is you don't touch a corpse. Well, Samson just decides, hey, that looks really good, and he scoops out some of the honey. He starts to eat it, and then he walks along and he gives some of the honey to his parents. And then they also ate it. Now, again, he breaks the vow again. And it makes note that he doesn't tell his parents where he got the honey. Now, it actually just kind of came to me. Now I kind of see why he's not telling his parents. Again, he's not meant to touch a corpse, so a dead body, right? He's not meant to. So when he kills the lion, technically he broke the vow. Well, when he eats the honey too, he breaks the vow. So really, when you think about it, he's also being defiant to his parents because he's not willing to go and honestly go to his parents and say, hey, just so you know, I broke the vow that you guys literally accepted from God. So he's basically, it kind of just came to me. He's also not honoring his parents as he's called to honor his parents. And we also do that, right? If we do wrong growing up, kids do it all the time. They try to hide things from their parents that they know, like, they probably won't like that I did that, and they are going to be upset about it. But through this, Samson and his family, they go down to meet with the woman. And then at this point, he is given 30 companions to go along with him. And Samson, again, feeling a little full of himself and a little bit happy about who he is as a person. And again, not really accepting it as God being the one who's given all the strength, he decides to tell these men a riddle. Now this part's pretty interesting because again, he's going to tell them a riddle. And the riddle he tells them is, out of the eater, something to eat, and out of the strong, something sweet. Now Samson, again, he didn't tell anybody that he killed a lion. He also didn't tell anybody that he ate from that lion. So no one would know this riddle at all. Nobody. But yet Samson decides, hey, I'm going to tell it. And then also he tells the people, hey, if you guess this riddle, I will give you, so he tells his 30 companions, if you guess the riddle, I will give you 30 pieces of linen. And then he says, but if you don't guess it, I get 30 pieces of linen. Now, again, so he tells the riddle that he knows they can't get. So meaning this is fully just for selfish desire. He's only doing it basically to make himself get what he wants. Most likely he wants linen, and he knows how to get it. He's just going to tell them something that they have no way of knowing. But these men, they go to Samson's wife, and they basically manipulate her into nagging Samson until he eventually breaks down and says, okay, I will tell you the answer. And he does tell her the answer. His wife then goes right back to those men and says, hey, I know the answer. And the answer is, what is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? Now Samson gets very angry about this. And what he says to these men is, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle. Now, on the surface, it could sound like Samson said, hey, why did you talk to my cow? My wife, who's a cow. But what he's really saying is, it is not right to manipulate my wife incorrectly and use her against me, because nobody plowed with a heifer. That's a cow. Everybody plowed with an ox. So he was basically saying, like, why'd you do that to my wife? You're not supposed to turn my wife against me. So then he gets angry. And what happens here is the second time, the Spirit of the Lord comes powerfully upon him again, and he goes down to Ashkelon and strikes down 30 random men, and then takes their garments and gives them to his 30 companions, because again, he lost the bet, basically. They guessed the riddle. So he goes and kills 30 people, which technically they're still Philistines. So again, this is where God is still using Samson's blessing to be like, hey, I still said you're going to conquer the Philistines. And he sees that Samson is just kind of doing a hotshot way of going through life. But God's like, hey, this is an opportunity. I'm going to give you the power. I'm going to come upon you. He goes and kills 30 men, takes their clothes, and then gives them to his 30 companions. And from this, which leads into chapter 15, and this part's kind of funny too, just because it's like, so Samson gets mad because they guessed it, so he kills 30 guys, gives the linen, and then his wife's father was like, I'll just give his wife to a companion, because clearly Samson doesn't want her. Without asking Samson, by the way. So as soon as we get into chapter 15, Samson goes to visit with his wife. And when he goes to visit with his wife's father says, I thought you hated your wife. I gave her to one of your companions. And then that father, this is a very odd family, but again, it's a pagan family. They're not following God. So just the father looks at Samson and says, hey, I gave your wife away to another man. Sorry. But why don't you just take her sister, because her sister's more attractive? It's not the way I would probably run the house. Now, Samson does what you would expect, hope any man should do in that moment. Samson, right away, now this is again though where Samson, it's that personal vendetta he's got going on, right, with the world, where Samson says, this time I have a right to get even with the Philistines, I will really harm them. And what he did here, again, this is one of those crazy feats that only with God could you do anything like this. There's no way without God could any man do this. Samson goes out and catches 300 fox, ties their tails together, and then ties a torch to the pairs of foxes, and then releases them out into the fields of all the Philistines, and into their vineyards, and into their storehouses, and it all burns down. Now notice too during this time, right, when Samson gets mad this time, he says, I'm going to get even with these people. And at no point in that area does it say, and then the power of God came over him to go do this. So Samson does this, and through this, the Philistines, of course, are mad because all of their goods are basically gone. So their response is not to go directly after Samson. They go to Samson's wife and her father and burn them. And this does, though, enrage Samson. And in this it says, Samson says to them, so again, they killed his wife and her father. And Samson says this to them, since you've acted like this, I swear that I won't stop until I get my revenge on you. And again, through this section, he burns their fields. It doesn't say God comes and helps him out. And it also doesn't say it here where Samson says, hey, I'm gonna now hurt you guys. So he attacks them viciously and slaughtered many of them. And then he went and stayed in the cave. But again, it doesn't say that the Spirit of the Lord came over Samson in this moment. Again, this is Samson just being himself. He's doing what he wants. Again, he's not following what God wants. He's still living out this life of, hey, I'm going to do what I want. And it shows right there. Because, again, God makes a point throughout this whole thing to be like, okay, at this point now, you get my power. But in this moment, he doesn't give it to him. So the Philistines, of course, they can't defeat Samson yet. But they go and they camp in Judah. And then the people of Judah are like, well, why are the Philistines here? What's going on? And they're like, hey, we're going to go get Samson. So then the people of Judah, 3,000 men, decide, well, we're going to have to get rid of Samson ourselves because we can't have the Philistines here. And this is exactly what they say. They go and meet with Samson, and they say, hey, don't you realize that the Philistines are rulers over us? Now that also kind of goes to show how far gone this area is, right? They don't say, right there they're saying another peoples are the ruler over them. They're not addressing that, hey, God's our ruler. Samson, you're here to help us. Let's go take him out. No, they instead are, hey, we're going to take you out because you're going to cause problems for us because now these people are mad that rule over us. Yet, again, Samson's blessing is to take out the Philistines. So Samson, again, if he was walking with God in that moment, he'd be like, hey, well, let's go get him. But what does Samson do? Instead, Samson says, yeah, that's all fine and dandy that they rule over you. But he says, I did to them what they did to me. And that's that is modern times to the core, right? How many people, right, as soon as somebody wrongs you in any way, your first reaction is usually not, how do I, you don't say, hey, it's all right, I forgive you. Most of the time, we say, I ain't going to help them next time. Or I'm not going to do that for them. Or when you get the moment to maybe be like, ooh, I could just not do this and it's going to upset them, and you know it's going to upset them. You intentionally do it, and then you feel good, right? You feel a little bit of pride of like, oh yeah, well they got what's coming to them because they were mean to me last time. I mean, marriage, married couples do this all the time to each other. It's the nitpicky stuff that you do to each other that's intentional, that you know is just going to make somebody mad. I know, I do it sometimes. And again, this is where, I can repent right now. There's many times where if my wife gets angry with me, and she probably has every godly reason to get mad at me. If she gets angry with me, I can do very small things that I know will annoy her just that little bit. And I can sit back and see her get angry and think, well, you shouldn't have done that to me. And it's very simple stuff. Like, for example, I could just throw something on the floor and just walk away. Or, something she really hates is, I could take my towel and I could put it with our other clothes. Because now she's got it sorted. But I know it annoys her, because it's like that little annoyance. But that's exactly what we do, right? It's, how dare they do something that they offended me in some way, they hurt me in some way, so I did it back, and now we're even, right? It's okay to do it because they did harm to me or they did wrong by me in my eyes. When really, when you think about it, Samson says, hey, I did exactly what they did to me. Well, it's like, not necessarily, Samson. I mean, you ruined all of their food, and then you killed a whole bunch of them. I mean, they retaliated because, again, they're pagan. It's expected that they're going to retaliate to what you do to them. But he retaliated all because all they did was trick his wife. They didn't actually do anything to him. But his retaliation was, I'm going to start killing people, burn your crops, I'm going to do all these things to you. And again, it's that idea that Samson is, again, he's very for himself. He's not for the Lord at this point. He's for himself, he cares about himself, and he wants to just live out his life as he pleases. So, again, these 3,000 men that are in the cave, after Samson says, hey, I did what they did to me, they said, hey, we're going to tie you up. And then he says, well, as long as you don't kill me, it's fine, you can tie me up. So they tie him up, and when they're taking him to the Philistines, as soon as he sees the Philistines, this is where Samson does something that's pretty crazy. He sees the Philistines, and again, now this is where God comes back, because again, God says, hey, you're going to take out these Philistines. As soon as the Philistines are approaching, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms, they basically turned into like burnt flax, which is basically like just the finest thread that doesn't even matter. And he breaks free, and he picks up a jawbone of a donkey, and then he slaughters all 1,000 men. And then, on top of that, after slaughtering all 1,000 men, he makes like a mockery out of it by saying a little riddle, which is, with a donkey's jawbone, I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone, I have killed 1,000 men. And we all know what donkey means. So Samson basically, like, insultingly kills them. So it's just a very interesting, but again, the Spirit of the Lord helped him do this. And again, this is after the Spirit of the Lord came upon him for the third time. After, again, he just went through doing all these horrible things where God was not assisting him in all those other acts that he was doing against individuals. He was doing all these selfish just desires of, well, no, you wronged me, I didn't like that, I'm going to do what I want. But yet then, as soon as there's that moment where he could potentially die, God shows up, gives him that blessing back, and says, hey, take him out. I called you to take out the Philistines. Again, like I said at the beginning, right? Even if you don't believe that if you don't know God's purpose, or if you don't want to follow God's purpose, you can't stop what God wants. If God wants it, it will happen. And that's what Samson is going through right now. And what's funny even more, so he just got the Spirit of the Lord over him to take out these 1,000 men. And then Samson, again, now he's tired, because he's still a human, so he's exhausted at this point. He feels like he's basically dwindling, right? He's out of energy, he's super thirsty. And this is what he does. He cries out to the Lord, and he says, because he was very thirsty, he cried out to the Lord, you have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised? the pagans. And it's very funny that, again, as soon as he gets to a low point, Samson, just this whole story, not once has Samson said anything about God. Not once has he said, oh, bless God, thank you, God, thanks for that power, God, thank you for helping me defeat these people, God. And then as soon as he needs help, he complains to God. And the beautiful thing here, though, is God's response to Samson is not, yeah, I'm going to let you be thirsty. You deserve this. And you should be punished for how you've been acting and treating me. No, what's God do? He opens up a hollow place, and water comes out for Samson to drink. And then Samson basically revives himself with that water. And from this, Samson does lead Israel for 20 years. But the Philistines are still around. And before we get into chapter 16, which chapter 16 is basically Samson's downfall, like big downfall, where he falls away from God, goes to prison, and then does repent at his deathbed, basically. But when you think about what just occurred, again, Samson leading up to this point has not even once praised God. He hasn't once said thank you to God. He hasn't once asked God for guidance. He hasn't asked God for any type of wisdom. And as soon as he has a problem, he yells at God and says, help me out. I'm supposed to be this blessed man under you. Why would you not help me? Why would you allow me to even get to this point? When God this whole time is still using him for his purpose, right? God, the good God, is literally helping Samson get through all this, even though Samson is completely ungrateful the entire time. And then in chapter 16, apparently after these 20 years, Samson didn't learn. Again, he's already been swindled by one woman, and then lost her. And it says that he went into Gaza, and he saw a prostitute, and then he went and spent the night with her. So right away, as soon as Samson basically shows up again, it's, well, that woman looks good, and just goes for his desires. And whenever the people of Gaza heard that Samson's in town, they go surround the area that he's in because they want to kill him. And Samson, in the middle of the night, he does something that's basically like, it's like an insult. He's basically showing that, like, you can't do anything to me. You can't touch me. You can't do anything. So again, they're surrounding the house that he's in. And what's Samson do? He walks out of the house. He goes to the city gates. He picks up, single-handedly, rips the city gates and their poles out of the ground, and then carries them up a hill. And that's basically him saying, there's nothing you can do to me. Why would you even try to do something to me? Again, he still has this feeling of I'm untouchable, but yet he still is failing to address it as I'm untouchable because God has a plan for me. And so after he's done this, he again goes for another woman, and he falls in love with another woman in the valley of Sorek, Delilah. And Delilah is really, again, his downfall, where when the rulers hear that he's with Delilah, they go to her and they say, hey, we will give you 11 shekels of silver if you find out what gives Samson his strength. So they're basically bribing her to find out, like, okay, how is Samson able to defeat all of us? How is he able to do these things that no man can do? And this also made me wonder, too, because when I read that, where they asked her, find out how Samson gets his strength, it made me wonder, again, our depiction of Samson is this huge, strong, muscular man. Well, if you're a huge, strong, muscular man, you would assume the rulers of the Philistines would be able to look at him and be like, I understand where his strength comes from, because clearly he's built with tons of muscle. So, it's one of those interesting things where you wonder if Samson is more of an ordinary man, and that great strength, again, is purely God. It's not him, and that's the idea, right? Samson is not the strong one. He doesn't have the strength. God working through him gives him his strength, just like it's for us, right? We can't do many things, but through God, we can do everything. And that's where Samson, again, he still believes in this mindset, because again, he gets tricked by another woman in this moment where she goes to him and says, hey, Can you tell me what makes you so strong? And she does this multiple times, and he kind of makes a mockery of it. Again, he jokes around with her. The first time he says, well, she said, hey, can you tell me how you get your great strength? And then he says, if anyone ties me up with fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, then I will be as weak as anybody else. She calls the Philistines, and then as soon as she calls out, the Philistines are upon you, he breaks free, and clearly he lied to her. And then she says, okay, seriously, you need to tell me, tell me again, what makes you so strong, right? And in that, he says, let me read right here. Yeah, 7 fresh bowstrings. Sorry, I'm talking, not even looking at my Bible. She gets mad, right? Because again, she's trying to swindle him, but then he swindles her. So she gets mad and says, why'd you make a fool of me? And she says, tell me the secret. And then he says, well, okay, you have to tie me with new ropes. So then she ties him with new ropes, calls the Philistines upon him. He breaks free right away again. And now she's really mad. And this is where basically now she starts to, again, nag him, saying, you're making a fool of me. You keep lying to me. How dare you do that to me? Meanwhile, again, which this is the pagan nature, right? This is, again, an ungodly nature where she is doing exactly what he's doing to her. But the difference is she's doing it, and she knows, basically she's playing into him being this kind of arrogant individual. And then Samson finally says, okay, you're right. And then he tells her. He says that no razor has ever been used on my head. And he said, because I have been a Nazarite, dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man. Now, it's kind of funny that right away, it's like Samson all of a sudden is like, oh, well, it's my hair, because again, I'm dedicated to God. We just read his entire life where Samson didn't seem to care about God the entire time. But then all of a sudden, it's, my strength's from God. And if you cut my hair, I lose my strength. And, again, if we go back to what I said about the Nazarite vow, the strength is not the hair, right? The hair is a symbol that you are with God. And you are doing certain things to be with God. So it's just a symbol. But Samson, I truly believe he does think it's his hair. That, hey, if it gets cut, I lose my strength with God. And this is where I think God basically shows him, all these times you lacked all that faith. You didn't honor me. You didn't show the world who I am and the blessings I'm giving you. You used it for your own personal gain. This is where I think God said, okay, you're right. Because the next section here, after he says, if you cut my hair, I will be as weak as any other man. She makes him fall asleep. She subdues him. The Philistines run in, and they cut his hair while he's sleeping. When he awakes, he tries to break free like any other time, but he's lost his strength. And it says here that when he loses his strength, he did not know that the Lord had left him. And so right there, it says the Lord had left him. And now we know, right, God is always there with us. We separate ourselves from God. And that's really what he did here anyway, right? Again, even here when he says, hey, if you cut my hair, that's what gives me these godly powers. He still couldn't honor that, hey, my strength is God. I get all my strength from God. He didn't say that. He said, no, it's my hair that I have the strength. And so so it's like God was like, okay, you truly have, you do not understand. You do not have me. And so God didn't do what he's been doing, which is, hey, I'm going to give you my strength to break free of this situation. So, he is seized by the Philistines, and immediately they gouge out his eyes, and then they took him down to Gaza, and then they basically made him grind grain in prison. So again, this great story of Samson where he ripped apart a lion. He defeated 1,000 Philistines. He defeated 30 other men. Those guys just kind of got the bad end of the deal, but he defeated 30 other men. And then he, at the end of his life, all that, and he ruled over Israel again for 20 years. And yet, at the end, it's just, hey, I'm in prison, grinding grain. He has no eyes, and his head was shaven. But his hair on his head began to grow again. And this is where we get into the death of Samson. So the Philistines, they're basically going to do a great sacrifice to their God. And they want Samson, again, they want to make like a fool out of Samson. So they say, hey, grab Samson. He's going to entertain us during this festival, during this sacrifice. And whenever they get him, they bring Samson out. And Samson says to the man who brings him out, hey, take me to where I can feel the pillars. Because he wanted to feel the pillars that support the temple that they were in. Now again, when I read that, it's almost like, it made a point to say, hey, his hair started growing back. As if God's speaking through him again. And then Samson knows, hey, they're taking me out in this temple. How would he know to say, hey, he doesn't know what the temple looks like, he can't see. But yet he knew to say, hey, take me to where the pillars are that support this entire temple. This is where I believe God was with him, being like, hey, this is your moment. This is your chance to live out the calling that I put on your life at the very beginning. This is your chance to actually see who you are and who I am for you. And so they do that. They put him there. And this is what Samson does. And for context, the area he's in right now, it's a temple full of Philistines. And then there's roughly 3,000 Philistines above him on the roof. And Samson's there, basically in the middle, against the support pillars. And Samson begins to pray to the Lord. Now, this is the only time that it's written that Samson prays. Outside of his parents praying, at the very beginning, this is the only time that Samson prays. And Samson prays to the Lord, and this is where Samson realizes where he got his strength. And Samson says, Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more. And let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And then Samson reached towards the pillars and pushed them over. And the entire temple collapsed down on them. And it killed everyone, including Samson. But the thing is, when I read how Samson's death was, one, Samson did what he was called to do. He did rule Israel. He did defeat Philistines. And in the end, he did what we all are called to do, which is truly surrender our life to God, right? And then if you look at Samson's death, it's very closely related. I read it where he's standing there basically on his deathbed. He knows that his life's over. And yet he cries out to the Lord. And God gives him what he wants. And we know that God believes Samson in that moment. We know, by the way, that Samson was truly faithful in that moment. And we know God honored him faithfully in that moment. Because Samson is seen in Hebrews in the Hall of Faith. Yeah. So we know that Samson didn't die being a selfish, separator from God. No, he was with God and faithfully with God. And it made me think of, when I read that, it made me think of when Jesus was on the cross and the thief, basically called out the other thief and said, hey, he's the Son of God. Don't you see? And then Jesus blesses the man right there. Because that man in that moment, what did he do? What did the thief do? He literally gave his life to Jesus right there. He said, I see who you are. And I'm going to say who you are. And I'm not going to hide it. And that's what Samson did. In the middle of this sacrifice for their God, he starts praying to God, the only true God. And then we know that he's viewed as faithful by God. And through reading this, it made me kind of think of a couple things, which is, like Samson, again, throughout this whole story, Samson never went around saying, hey, God, what do you want me to do in this moment? What do you want for my life? Where do you want me to go? And it made me think, how often do we not do that, right? When's the last time you truly in surrender ask God, what do you want for my life? Show me what you want me to do so I can live out the calling, the blessing, whatever you want to call it, we should do that. And if you're thinking, well, I don't have a calling, or God's never told me what I should be doing, just reflect a little and realize that you just need to listen, right? You need to listen and ask. But you have to do it in full surrender, just as Samson did at the end of his life. In full surrender, you have to say, God, all I need is you to show me the strength that you need of me, and just, I'll do whatever you have me do. And then you do that. And as long as you do that faithfully and you walk in that obedience, you will get that blessing from God, right? And that's where you have to understand, right? That blessing from God is not just now your life is perfect. The blessing from God is you get to walk with God doing what He wants you to do. And I'll tell you, again, life's not going to be perfect and easy, but you will see blessings everywhere around you because now you have that feeling and image and discernment with God to see people being touched and changed with God. And, that's really just the question I would pose is, just search yourself to find out, hey, what do you want me to do? Not what do I want to do? And that's really the ending there for Samson.
Good job.